Pedro Pascal has been recently popping up in every movie and show there is possibly out there. Hence, we must find out what spell has he cast on Hollywood to get this famous all of a sudden. With rising opportunities, Pedro worked from the bottom and made it all the way up after putting decades worth of blood and sweat into acting. Being one of the most fan-favorite and hot celebrities, Pedro Pascal has starred in many franchises, including Marvel, DC, and Star Wars, which are literally considered the biggest franchises in the Hollywood. But there are more underrated movies and shows that need to be acknowledged as they show the finest of his acting skills and his so-called handsome face. From Hot Ones to SNL, he has made quite the impression in the marketing promotional world as well, by putting on hilarious skits. There is much more to his charismatic presence besides acting, so let's find out more about this handsome man together. The movie which first comes to our mind when we think of this man is Kingsman, The Golden Circle from 2017, which was directed by Matthew Vaughn, a very prominent and fun-loving director. The budget for this movie was $104 million, and it made approximately $400 million at the box office. Now, I know this isn't his most popular work, but it was a good start to elevate his career since it was a big project. This movie is a sequel to Kingsman, The Secret Service, which is about a top-secret organization fighting against dangerous threats to keep the peace of the world. What makes this second part outstanding is that Pedro Pascal is actually the villain here. So basically, his character is a smooth-talking cowboy with a high-tech lasso and killer instincts, which add a lot to his character. He fights beside the other heroes of the movie for a while, until he turns against them and turns into a spicy and charming villain everyone hates to love. While it isn't confirmed, some sources say that he got paid around $1 million, which says a lot about how big of an actor he is. Speaking of big actors, in one of his most recent works, he joins literally one of the biggest actors in the industry, in a movie called Materialist from 2025. This is a romantic comedy movie where Pedro is joined by none other than Chris Evans, who is famously known for his role as Captain America, and many others. The other actor is Dakota Johnson, who is known for her role in the family-friendly 50 Shades of Grey movies. This movie is directed by Celine Song and has a budget of $20 million, whereas it has made only $31 million at the box office. Pedro Pascal in this movie plays the role of a man named Harry, who falls for a woman who is more interested in status rather than actual things that truly matter in life. As love and wealth collide, Pedro Pascal delivers the perfect role of a charming and magnetic man. Since we're on his most recent projects, let's jump straight into his most recent, most anticipated, and highest budget movie yet, The Fantastic Four. He is getting to play the most important Marvel character here, so let's break it all down. The movie's release date is July 25th, 2025, and it is being directed by Matt Shakman with a whopping budget of $200 to approximately $250 million, which is crazy. This is obviously a Marvel movie, which is one of the biggest franchises in the world, and they specifically chose Pedro because of how brilliant he is. He plays a character called Reed Richards, also known as Mr. Fantastic, who is the smartest man on the entire planet. The story follows his and his team's origin, but Pedro has the lead role, and not only this, his name is also listed as one of the main people in Avengers: Doomsday, which has the potential to be the world's highest-grossing movie ever. So, Pedro is playing almost lead roles in the industry's top movies. But what makes this character of Pedro Pascal so special that Mr. Fantastic is one of the lead roles in Avengers? Doomsday? Well, as the name suggests, the main villain of this movie is Dr. Doom, who is one of the biggest Marvel villains. And guess what? He starts as a rival of Mr. Fantastic and then goes on to be a major villain. Mr. Fantastic joins the Avengers with his team to take Dr. Doom down. So, Pedro's character is a person who will bring the whole Doomsday movie together through the villain. But not only that, he is a very important character for many other reasons, one of them being a Marvel villain called Galactus. Galactus is a planet eater, a giant cosmic being that goes from planet to planet consuming them. So Pedro's character accidentally sends signals that Galactus picks up and comes to devour Earth. Now, Pedro here is important in this situation for two main reasons. One of them is the fact that he introduces Galactus. This is one of the most intriguing Marvel characters that fans have been dying to see. Everyone who wants to watch the Fantastic Four movie is only because of Galactus, and Pedro introduces this character, which makes him so important here. The second reason I mentioned earlier is stopping Galactus. Obviously, when Galactus comes, he will want to consume the planet, And the only person who can stop him is the smartest person on the planet, who will manage to find a way to stop Galactus. So, Pedro is so important in this franchise because he will basically bring everything together, including the villains and the heroes. His ship arrived at the end of the Thunderbolts movie, which means that he will come to the Thunderbolts and gather the rest of the heroes. All of this makes Pedro extremely important to the Marvel Universe, but if you put everything aside, there is still another reason that makes him so important. This little baby right here. Reed Richards has a baby with his wife, Sue Storm, and this baby will carry the future of Marvel. Franklin Richards is an extremely strong character who can create and destroy entire universes. So, Mr. Fantastic is the most important new Marvel character who is supposed to bring this whole universe together. And once again, Pedro did not give an audition for this role. Marvel cast him themselves as the most important character in their universe, which shows how great of an actor he is. But let's look at his past and see where he got popular. And after that, we will talk about what major roles he played even before becoming mainstream popular. Before the Marvel industry wanted Pedro all to themselves, there were many others who gave him leading roles that made him popular. Before jumping into the DC Universe, let's talk about the franchise that made Pedro popular, to the point where fans liked him so much that everyone started casting him, including one of the most popular games. And they even make memes on how he is taking over every franchise. Anyways, the franchise that made him this popular is the Star Wars franchise. Star Wars may be as big as the Marvel franchise, as they have made countless movies and shows, and have created millions and millions of fans who are interested in what they show. When the majority of their movies were over, they had plenty of spin-off TV shows to make. One of the most successful spin-offs of Star Wars was the show called The Mandalorian, which, of course, had Pedro Pascal in the lead role. He got extremely popular from this role, and the only thing fans complained about was that they didn't get to see his handsome face. This is because in this show, characters come from a tribe or clan of assassins that wear helmets and collect bounties, and they are not allowed to show their face to anyone. So, these specific bounty hunters were originally introduced in the Star Wars movies, and they didn't necessarily have that big of a role in the franchise. But this spin-off is based on one single Mandalorian who lives alone by himself, taking on local bounties. So this character of Pedro Pascal seems pretty normal at first, but just at the end of the episode, they reveal something that changes everything. We see that he is taking care of Baby Yoda. So, just in case you didn't know, Yoda is one of the biggest Star Wars characters and plays a very important role in the storyline of all of those movies. So basically, this spin-off of Pedro Pascal is a prequel to those movies, where it shows how Yoda was rescued as a baby by a Mandalorian. Now this show goes very personal into the character of Pedro and explores how he saved this baby and made friends along the way, even though he was a stubborn lone bounty hunter. So once again, another franchise had an extremely important role that sets the entire plot straight, and it was given to Pedro Pascal. So the overall budget of this show was over $100 million, and it is not stated how much money it made in return, but it is one of the most streamed shows on Disney. So casting Pedro in their franchise was a huge success for the Star Wars universe. This made Pedro very popular, and he started getting more and more roles. And due to this, right after The Mandalorian, which was in 2019, he immediately joined the DC Universe, which is the only cursed franchise Pedro couldn't save, and his role wasn't as impressive or held any significant value. This movie was Wonder Woman, 1984. Not only did Pedro have a basic role, but his movie literally flopped and went into extreme loss, losing $40 million. Its initial budget was $200 million, and at the box office, it made $160 million. So after all this glaze, we finally have a franchise that cast Pedro Pascal and still stayed below mediocre. Well, at least the new Superman movie saved DC, so we don't have to worry about that. Anyways, Pedro Pascal in 2020 joined the DC Universe as Maxwell Lord, who is actually kind of a big character, but he has been recast now by James Gunn's brother, Sean Gunn, so it doesn't matter now. But we still have to talk about how, even in this awful movie, Pedro Pascal managed to play a decent role. So his character is a flashy, smooth-talking TV mogul whose charm masks deep insecurity and desperation. When he gains control of a mystical artifact that grants wishes, he doesn't just use it, he becomes it, trading bits of his humanity for global influence and power. As the world crumbles under the weight of unchecked desires, Max spirals into madness, chasing love and legacy in all the wrong places. Pedro Pascal brings explosive energy and heartbreaking depth to the role, turning what could have been a typical villain into a tragic, magnetic force. He's dangerous, broken, and somehow human. You want him to lose, but a part of you wants him to heal. This is the exact reason why Pedro Pascal is a very good actor. It doesn't matter what movie he is in, or what character he is playing. He does it so well that it adds depth to the character. This happens so much that this character turned into a very popular meme format, even though the movie wasn't even popular. But nevertheless, despite all his efforts, this movie was a big flop. So while his work was good, it could have been better. Let's move back to some of his better work. So early on, I mentioned that after gaining fame from The Mandalorian, he got cast in almost every big franchise, including games. The Last of Us, one of the most played zombie games, which to this day is still one of the most fan-favorite games ever. So the live action of this was considering many big-time actors, many actors that would have been very good for the role, but they ended up choosing Pedro Pascal for the role because of his popularity. Even before The Mandalorian, he had been in some very popular shows through which he had made a name for himself, and we will get into it later on as well. But for now, we've got The Last of Us live-action TV show in 2023. The overall budget for this show was about $100 million, and Pedro Pascal was paid about $4.5 million, because, at this point, he had become a very big actor because of The Mandalorian. So the whole story is about a zombie outbreak where Pedro Pascal plays a character called Joel. As Joel Miller, a seasoned survivor in a post-apocalyptic world devastated by a fungal disease that has transformed a large portion of humanity into vicious, infected monsters, Pedro Pascal gives a performance that defines his career in The Last of Us. After the terrible death of his little daughter in the midst of the first breakout, Joel is initially a broken man, spiritually and emotionally devoid. Smuggling a teenage girl named Ellie across the nation is an improbable mission that he is forced to undertake years later. Possibly humanity's last hope for a cure, Ellie is resistant to the illness, making her more than simply another survivor. Something that starts out as a transactional, cold job gradually transforms into something far more profound and devastating. A strong, intricate father-daughter attachment that calls into question Joel's entire survival philosophy. Pedro Pascal gives Joel's rough exterior life with a subtle intensity and emotional accuracy, revealing to us every glimmer of dread, guilt, and hidden affection beneath his tired eyes. A figure who feels incredibly real and heartbreakingly human is created by his nuanced facial expressions, troubled silences, and the controlled rage in his voice. Pascal is more than simply an actor. He is Joel, and without a word, you can feel every scar he bears. An eerie, intensely emotional examination of what it means to love in a society that has lost everything. While other actors definitely would have been a good pick for this role, Pedro Pascal is the perfect Joel. Aside from his role in this show, the show itself made him very popular. The action-adventure game with the same name, The Last of Us, had received high praise from critics for its compelling plot, nuanced characters, and emotional depth. It emphasizes Joel and Ellie's strong friendship while fusing a gripping survival game with a dramatic story. Its appeal stems from the fact that it revolutionized video game storytelling by making it more sophisticated, poignant, and memorable. So with this hype, when the TV show was announced, it had already been so hyped that it was destined to succeed. When it was released, it became one of the most watched shows of the year. And everyone who didn't even know the game watched the show, which gave Pedro all the more fame he needed after The Mandalorian to be cast in something so big, such as Marvel. But before all of this, before Marvel, before The Last of Us, and before The Mandalorian, who was Pedro Pascal? And what movies and shows was he in? Well, believe it or not, he was still in quite a lot of big shows and movies. From these well-known shows, let's dive into a TV show called Narcos, which you must have heard of because of how popular it was from 2015 to 2017. The first season of the show had a budget of $25 million, and it was at that time considered one of Netflix's most popular and most watched shows of all time because of how great it was. One of Pedro's most captivating performances is in this show, and possibly in contemporary criminal drama, which is his portrayal of DEA agent Javier Peña. Pedro portrays a real-life agent who played a crucial part in the search for Pablo Escobar, the Colombian drug lord, and he instantly captivates you with his unvarnished, grounded passion. Peña is not a showy figure who relies on grandiosity or ostentation. Rather, Pedro creates a man who is devoted to his work, frequently exhausted by its demands, and continuously straddling the line between survival and justice. Pedro transforms Peña from a law enforcement officer into the central figure in a complex and violent conflict by using nuanced facial expressions, accurate timing, and controlled emotion. Pedro's portrayal is amazing because of how well he strikes a balance between sensitivity and strength. Pedro keeps Javier Peña from becoming numb or robotic, despite his continual exposure to violence, corruption, and moral compromise. Pedro keeps you riveted to the screen with his slow burn of emotions, rather than shouting them out. Javier Peña's writing already establishes a solid basis for depth. He is smart, driven, frequently cynical, and unafraid to get his hands dirty. Pedro adds subtle nuances that give Peña a more realistic sense. He performs with a purposeful calm, understanding that not every scenario requires activity or conversation. The most impactful moments occasionally occur when he remains silent and allows the tension in the quiet to build. Pedro expertly leans into this area, representing a man whose work compels him to see the worst in people, while attempting to preserve what little of himself he still has. Pedro Peña is an essential emotional counterpoint in a story full of drug lords, shootouts, and political intrigue. He provides the audience with a clear understanding of the true costs associated with the drug war. His narration is thoughtful, tired of the world, and frequently tinged with sadness, as it offers more than just exposition, especially in Season 3. This genuineness is what gives Narcos its emotional strength. Pedro never elevates Peña to the status of a classic hero, but he also never lets him turn into a worthless tool of the police. His journey is all the more compelling because he is flawed, conflicted, and always changing. Pedro's ability to portray ethically complicated characters with empathy and gravitas, in addition to his talent, made him the ideal casting choice for this role. He always plays to the story's advantage, adding charisma without ever taking center stage. Pedro's performance is steadfast, captivating, and subtly powerful, even when surrounded by legendary figures like Escobar. What I mean by this is that the show portrays many other characters far greater than him and what he has to offer, but he still stands out, which proves how good of an actor he is. Pedro's ability to convey the passage of time is among his most remarkable performances. Peña grows weary and increasingly pessimistic as the seasons change, yet he nevertheless maintains his optimism that something positive could emerge from all the hardship. It's behavior that subtly demands your respect without attempting to attract notice. It's clever, nuanced, and crucial to the reason Narcos has such a strong emotional connection and has become famous worldwide. And if we go even before this era, then we get to Game of Thrones. This show needs no introduction, as it was the most watched and the #1 TV show of all time. Though Pedro Pascal only appeared for 7 episodes, he still accomplished some remarkable things and proved back then how outstanding he is. Pedro's brief but memorable portrayal of Oberyn Martell, popularly known as the Red Viper, in Game of Thrones, made a lasting impression on one of the most recognizable television shows. Driven by passion and a desire for vengeance, Oberyn, the fiery Prince of Dorne, is introduced in Season 4 and arrives in King's Landing. Pedro enters the part with a powerful presence, portraying Oberyn as a fighter and a lover, sharper with his words, deadly with a spear. Despite having little on-screen time, Pedro's portrayal made Oberyn a fan favorite practically immediately, even before he was popular in mainstream media. Pedro's portrayal of Oberyn is particularly captivating because of his conviction, rather than just his self-assurance or fighting prowess. Oberyn is in King's Landing to pursue justice for his sister Elia, who was abused and killed during Robert's rebellion by Gregor Clegane. Pedro portrays this need for vengeance with extreme intensity while maintaining Oberyn's humanity. He is a guy with a code who firmly believes in honor, love, and family. He is not a bloodthirsty brute. Pedro develops a figure with a soul by skillfully incorporating these emotional strands within Oberyn's audacious veneer, which only serves to highlight how tragic his end is. The inclusion of Oberyn in the narrative gives Game of Thrones a lively new vitality. He strikes out as someone who moves with flair and purpose among the cunning politicians and stoic lords. Pedro makes excellent use of his body. Whether he's slouching in silk robes or charging into battle, he constantly commands attention. His motions have a dancer's cadence, particularly when he battles the Mountain in the notorious trial by combat sequence. In addition to the show's unexpected conclusion, Pedro's flowing, captivating performance made that fight one of its most talked about moments. The amount of backstory Pedro conveys in such a short amount of screen time is remarkable. Oberyn's anguish, love for his hometown, bisexuality, and moral clarity in a murky world are all revealed in a few scenes. This demonstrates Pedro's exceptional talent as well as the quality of the script because he fills in the emotional voids with subtlety and depth, giving Oberyn the same level of development as characters who have been on the program for several seasons. In order to give the performance a genuine foundation, Pedro studied Oberyn's cultural history and trained intensively in spear work, as he disclosed in interviews. Oberyn's already intriguing persona gains depth from his on-screen relationship with Indira Varma. When taken as a whole, they depict a very sensual yet emotionally stable relationship. Pedro contributes to making the love narrative in Game of Thrones seem real and equitable, which is uncommon to see in the show. Their vibrant scenes provide a unique window of happiness and liberation in an otherwise harsh world. Pedro's tribute to Oberyn's Dornish ancestry is among the show's most impressive features. The southern Westeros region of Dorne is renowned for its strong sense of cultural identity, staunch independence, and liberal views on gender and sexuality. Pedro took advantage of this, giving Oberyn a distinct accent and mannerisms that distinguished him from the formal nobles of King's Landing. His Oberyn flames with personal conviction, moves with feline grace, and speaks with a melodic cadence. Pedro portrayed him with the assurance and consideration of someone who genuinely grasped the risks because he was a revolutionary and not simply another nobleman. So basically, only in 7 episodes, Pedro Pascal managed to portray so many things through his character, despite not even being given that much screen time. This role was definitely one of the first big roles he has ever gotten, and given that, he is doing a far better job than anyone else could. Because of this, he has also been in similar movies that essentially depict the same world building. He also stars in the second part of the popular Russell Crowe movie called Gladiator. This second part came out in 2024 with a budget of $250 million, and it made over $400 million at the box office. The film is about Lucius, who is forced to join the Colosseum after his house is overrun by the strong Roman emperor, years after seeing Maximus killed by his uncle. With anger in his heart and the empire's future in jeopardy, he turns to the past for the courage and dignity required to restore Rome's splendor to its citizens. In this movie, Pedro portrays General Marcus Acacius, a strong character with a close relationship to the fabled Maximus. He is presented as a man who has been molded by years of duty, conflict, and the demanding task of leading troops for the empire, rather than as a villain. Pedro gives Acacius a sense of realism from the very first scenes. Long remarks could never convey the quiet intensity he exudes. He is disciplined, in control, and feels as though he is carrying ghosts with him when he gets to North Africa. Pedro gives Acacius weight without saying much by letting passion simmer, rather than forcing it to the surface. This is obviously a man who has experienced things that he will never forget. Pedro also ensures that the audience feels it. Pedro's use of personal conflict to ground Acacius is what sets him apart. He is a Roman general who is devoted to the empire on the one hand. On the other hand, he bears the remembrance of Maximus's honor as someone who once followed him. Stillness is a tool Pedro employs. You can tell he doesn't dramatize or overact by the way he holds his shoulders or listens to other people talk. Despite the fact that their goals are at odds, Pedro evokes an almost protective feeling in the scenes with Lucius, Lucilla's son. He portrays Acacius as a man torn between his former convictions and his current directives, rather than as a cold-blooded murderer. Although it's not a loud performance, you remember it. Pedro moves as the conflict comes. He moves as though he has been taught daily and views fighting as a responsibility rather than a show. His sword moves are crisp, swift, and unobtrusive. It's clear that this character fights to put an end to things rather than to impress. Pedro put a lot of effort into training for these situations, and it shows. Every block or counter seems earned, and every motion carries weight. However, the underlying emotion is what matters most. This is not to his liking, and he displays his flaws in between fights. He gives Acacius eyes that never stop remembering and searching. That's what makes him unique. He transforms a potentially straightforward part into one that feels conflicted and human. Pedro was the ideal candidate for this position. He has the same charisma that Russell Crowe gave Maximus. Serene, intense, and very intimate. Pedro, however, also contributes something else, a feeling of introspection. a feeling that the focus of this conflict is now on what is left behind rather than triumph. The man he depicts has sacrificed all for Rome and is now attempting to recall why. The movie never makes an effort to portray Acacius as completely nice or wicked. Pedro also doesn't shove him in either direction. He portrays him as a troubled, arrogant man who is gradually pursuing an unspoken truth that may come too late. Now, since we're talking about second parts, one of Pedro's early works includes The Equalizer 2. Pedro portrayed Dave York, the primary antagonist in the 2018 film The Equalizer 2. With a production budget of over $62 million, it was Denzel Washington's first sequel ever. The movie's global box office success of over $190 million demonstrated that people were still interested in learning more about Robert McCall's story. The film, which was directed by Antoine Fuqua, combines personal retaliation with action. It centers on McCall's quest for justice following the death of a close friend. Pedro's personality is crucial to this adventure. Pedro's presence changes the tone of the plot and gives the battle a human dimension that wasn't present in the first film, even if the main focus of the film is Denzel's mission. Dave York is presented as McCall's longtime friend and former clandestine operations colleague. He initially appears to be a well-known figure from the past, but as the narrative progresses, it becomes clear that he is a member of the same group that committed the crimes McCall is attempting to avenge. Pedro carefully plays this turn. He is composed and likable in his opening sequences, giving the impression that he and McCall are related. However, Pedro doesn't go overboard after his actual character is exposed. He gives York the impression that he still thinks he is correct. The betrayal is more painful as a result. Pedro portrays York in a subdued manner. He doesn't yell or behave in an unkind manner. Rather, he maintains objectivity and coolness. He portrays a man who has come to terms with engaging in sinister activities. Pedro appears to be attempting to persuade McCall that they are the same, as he delivers each phrase with steady assurance when York eventually faces McCall. Pedro's act is effective because of this. He doesn't behave in an evil manner. He behaves as though he believes he is simply being intelligent in a damaged world. The final battle becomes more intimate because of such realism. Pedro gave York a sense of realism, which lends emotional significance to what would otherwise be only another confrontation. Pedro's character provides The Equalizer 2 its emotional edge, despite the fact that Denzel's character is its main focus. McCall's journey wouldn't feel as intimate without York. The audience gets a glimpse of what McCall might have been if he had made other decisions through Pedro's scenes. York is similar to a mirror, in that he uses his talents and abilities for himself rather than for other people. Pedro played it straight because he realized that. No flamboyant speeches, no crazy actions. Simply a man who took a more sinister route and never turned around. York was an excellent villain because he was genuine. And just like all the roles discussed before, Pedro Pascal nailed this one as well and perfectly executed it. But this movie was a bit grounded with hand-to-hand fight scenes. If you are looking for something sci-fi and more in the fantasy genre, then Pedro's best work in that genre would be The Great Wall. Zhang Yimou's high-profile action fantasy film, The Great Wall, was released in 2016. It was one of the most costly movies ever made entirely in China, with a production budget of almost $150 million and starring Matt Damon. It had mixed reviews, but it made over $330 million globally. Set in ancient China, the plot centers on a group of Western mercenaries who find the Great Wall and learn that it is being used to protect against terrifying beasts. Pedro co-stars with Damon as Tovar, one of the mercenaries. Pedro's character in this movie isn't very complex. Tovar's primary purpose is to provide comedic relief and assistance. He frequently makes dry comments during stressful situations and is aggressive and sarcastic. Pedro portrays him with charm and confidence, but that is about all that is required for the part. From the start of the film until its conclusion, Tovar doesn't alter much, in contrast to his more complex characters. He is initially self-centered and doubtful, and he largely remains that way. As a result of the action and graphics being the main focus, Tovar becomes a supporting character. Pedro still infuses the character with vitality. He is entertaining to watch and counterbalances some of the more somber moods in the movie. He gives what could have been a lifeless character some life, and his scenes with Matt Damon have wonderful chemistry. However, he doesn't have as many opportunities to explore emotion or development in this part as he would in Oberyn or Acacius. Pedro works as best he can within the constraints of the Great Wall, which isn't designed for in-depth character development. It's one of his more casual roles. It's enjoyable, yet nothing too good. But even these movies are so mainstream and popular that people have seen or heard of them. Let's dive into some of his underrated movies that not many people have heard of. Now, this is a small list of movies because Pedro Pascal has only been in well-known movies. His first underrated movie is a space movie called Prospect from 2018. In this movie, Pedro portrays the enigmatic visitor Ezra on a perilous alien moon. Despite being a low-budget sci-fi thriller with only about $4 million, the film developed a devoted fan base thanks to its distinctive aesthetic and brutal world-building. This is why this movie managed to make over $20 million, which is good given how low budget it is. The film's story takes us to an alien moon as a father and his daughter attempt to gather valuable stones. Their journey quickly devolves into a struggle for existence, and the child finds it difficult to cope with her father's avarice. Pedro's persona begins as a danger, but gradually develops into something more nuanced. Pedro handles Ezra's survival with cool composure. He isn't obviously good or bad. He stands out in the harsh surroundings around him because of his formal, even poetic, speech patterns. A lot of the tension in the movie is carried by Pedro. He and the young lead are alone in most of the sequences, and their dynamic is constantly changing. He never overacts and gives Ezra a calm strength. Rather, he develops the part through silence, deliberate speech, and minor gestures. His performance is so powerful because of this. Pedro makes you want to keep watching Ezra, even with a straightforward plot, since you never know what he'll do next. He gave the little movie a sense of grandeur, because that is just the type of actor Pedro Pascal is. He brings universes together and makes them whole. I hope you liked this video we made for you about Pedro Pascal and almost all of his movies. Please subscribe for more content like this.